The day Mr. Harrison snapped her violin string in front of the entire class was the day everything changed. It happened on a gray Monday morning in a small public school just outside Toronto. Snow clung to the windows, and the music room smelled faintly of polished wood and old sheet music. 12-year-old Amara stood at the front of the class, her second-hand violin trembling in her hands. The instrument had scratches along its sides, and one of the tuning pegs had been glued back in place by her father. Mr. Harrison sighed loudly as she missed another note. "Maybe music isn't for everyone," he said, his voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet room. A few students exchanged glances. Someone in the back stifled a laugh. Amara felt her cheeks burn. She kept her eyes on the floor. She had practiced every night in the narrow living room of their apartment in Scarborough, trying not to disturb the neighbors. Her mother worked double shifts at a long-term care home. Her father drove for a rideshare company across icy streets to make ends meet. They couldn't afford private lessons like some of the other students. Mr. Harrison stepped forward and took the violin from her hands. "You need a proper instrument to play properly," he muttered. As he adjusted the tuning, the old E string snapped with a sharp, humiliating crack. The class burst into whispers. "Well," he said flatly, placing the broken violin back into her hands, "that's what happens when you don't maintain your equipment." Amara swallowed the lump in her throat and returned to her seat. She could feel every pair of eyes on her. In that moment, she wanted to disappear into the snow outside, to melt away quietly. But what no one in that room knew was that Amara didn't play the violin to impress anyone. She played because it was the only time she felt heard. That night, she didn't cry. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding the violin with the broken string. Her father came in quietly. "Another tough day?" he asked softly. She nodded. He examined the instrument under the yellow kitchen light. "We'll fix it," he said with a tired smile. "Maybe not today, but we will." A week later, after picking up extra shifts, her father surprised her with a new set of strings. They weren't expensive, but to Amara, they felt like gold. She practiced harder than ever. Before school, after dinner, on weekends when other kids were at hockey practice or the mall. Her fingers developed calluses, her shoulders ached, but something inside her refused to give up. 2 months later, the school announced its annual Winter Arts Showcase. Parents, teachers, and community members would attend. Mr. Harrison selected students he believed were performance-ready. Amara's name was not on the list. When she asked if she could audition, he hesitated. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It's a big stage." "Yes," she replied quietly. He handed her a piece of sheet music, more difficult than anything they had practiced in class. "If you can play this by Friday, I'll consider it." She took the sheet music home. It was Vivaldi's Winter, from the Four Seasons. The notes danced across the page like a blizzard. For 3 days, she barely slept. She watched free tutorial videos online from the public library computers. She slowed down recordings and replayed difficult sections until her fingers learned the pattern. Her mother brought her tea and kissed her forehead. Her father listened from the hallway, pride shining in his tired eyes. On Friday, she stood again at the front of the music room. The same gray light filtered through the windows. The same students watched. She closed her eyes and began. The first notes were soft, uncertain. Then something shifted. The music swelled, sharp and powerful, like wind slicing across a frozen lake. Her bow moved with confidence. The fast passages sparkled. The quiet sections trembled with emotion. It was no longer just practice, it was her story pouring out. When she finished, the room was completely silent. Mr. Harrison stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You'll perform," he said simply. The night of the Winter Arts Showcase arrived. Snow fell gently outside the auditorium as families filled the seats. Amara peeked through the curtain and spotted her parents in the third row. Her mother still wore her scrubs from work. Her father had rushed in straight from his car, jacket dusted with snow. Her name was announced. She walked onto the stage, heart pounding so loudly she thought the microphone might pick it up. The bright lights made it impossible to see faces clearly, but she knew they were there. Watching, judging, waiting. She remembered that Monday morning. The snapped string, the laughter. Then she lifted her violin. The first note cut through the air like crystal. As she played, the auditorium transformed. The audience wasn't thinking about brands of violins or private lessons. They weren't comparing her to anyone else. They were simply listening. Her music was raw and alive. It carried the exhaustion of late nights, the warmth of her father's encouragement, the quiet strength of her mother's sacrifices. It carried every tear she never let fall. Halfway through, even Mr. Harrison leaned forward in his seat backstage. When the final note echoed into silence, there was a split second where no one moved. Then the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The applause was thunderous. Parents wiped their eyes. A woman in the front row pressed her hand to her heart. Her father stood taller than she had ever seen him. Her mother cried openly. Backstage, Mr. Harrison approached her slowly. "I was wrong," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Talent doesn't come from price tags." Amara nodded, not in anger, but in quiet understanding. She didn't need an apology to validate her. The music had already done that. In the weeks that followed, a local community arts sponsor offered her a scholarship for formal training. But the real victory wasn't the recognition. It was the confidence that had grown inside her like a steady flame. She had learned something no classroom could teach. Sometimes the world underestimates you because it only sees what you lack. It doesn't see your hunger. It doesn't see your late nights. It doesn't see your heart. But if you keep playing, even when strings snap, even when people doubt you, one day your music will be too powerful to ignore. And when that day comes, the silence before the applause will be worth every single note.